What's up, guys? So this setting may look familiar. Devin just did her testimony video, so it's time for me to do mine. Where do we start? So I didn't really grow up in church like Devin did. We went sometimes with like my grandparent. I was probably 9-ish, somewhere in there. I went to church with a friend of mine that I used to ride dirt bikes with back then. That was like the first time that I really remember going to church, that I can like visualize it, because before that I was like just really too young to really even know what was going on. So like I said, that was the first time that I can like remember, and they were baptizing people that day that I just happened to go with them. So that was interesting to me. I still didn't really know what it meant, but for whatever reason I just knew I wanted that, and the church service was good. I mean, it spoke to me then as a 9-year-old. I wish I could watch it again and really know what was like going on, what was happening. So yeah, so when I came home, I think I told my parents about it. Or actually, I don't think I told them right away. I think it was the next time that I went and rode dirt bikes, and I think that kind of reminded me of it for whatever reason. So I think I told my dad then. I don't remember if my mom was there or not, but I told them that I wanted to be baptized and be saved. And so they were like, okay. So fast forward, we ended up finding a church to go to. So I don't remember like the timeline of like how far apart that was. I could be wrong, but I think it was it was a pretty good while. I think it was like a couple of years, like before we actually started going to church, like consistently. Then I've never been the most extroverted person or social person, so I didn't really love it at first. Maybe that's what it was. And then maybe we tried it, and then I was in like the kids thing, and I remember that was when I was still in elementary school. That was 5th grade. I didn't like it, and so I think we ended up going back when I got into middle school, and I ended up liking it. So we stayed there for like 2 or 3 years. So while I was doing that, I had a good youth leader and a couple good like youth leaders and mentors or whatever that I kind of clung to in a way. And so I decided then too that I would be baptized. As far as I know, my like testimony video from when I was baptized, which was a long time ago, is still on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it is. I was like probably 11 or 12 maybe. So then I was baptized there at that church on Mother's Day, actually, fun fact. So that was cool. And then I know my mom like really enjoyed it that day too, because it was Mother's Day. So yeah, and that was that. And I was, still really young and like hadn't really experienced a lot. I always like knew like kind of what it meant to be baptized, but I didn't know like the true meaning, and I didn't know really how to walk it out. Like that was kind of the thing that I think is a problem, especially here like in the Bible Belt, and maybe I'm wrong, but there's a lot of like getting people saved, but there's not a lot of living it out. The person has to like search that out for themselves. Go to do this to learn, go to do that. But the same people that are ministering to people, tell them the gospel and teach them about Christ, that's like their finish line. And that sometimes is okay, but sometimes it's not. So there's people that we try to like keep accountability with, like, hey, this is like basically your next steps kind of thing. And even if we don't do that, if we can like plug them into the right people who can do a better job than us, because we're definitely not pastors or anything, or get them like into the right church or into the right like small group or whatever, then that is, you gotta minister and tell them the gospel. And then if they decide to get saved, then you got more work. That's not the finish line, which can be hard to remember sometimes, and it's a lot more work, but that's the way to do it right there. Because for years I didn't know like how to live it out. So we went to that church for a couple years, and I was like not really living for God or anything. Then I started going to church with Devin when I turned 16. If I had to guess. So I didn't go to church, and then we started going to church for like 2 or 3 years, and then it was like 4-ish years where I didn't go, and then turned 16, start going with Devin to the church that she was going to at the time. That's the church that she was like raised in. We got really involved with the youth group. That was a big help with me. I related a lot to like a couple, the youth pastor and a couple of the other like youth leaders there. And for me, since I'm not an extrovert and I don't really enjoy having conversations conversations with people, as bad as that sounds. Sometimes I do, but for me to be able to relate to somebody, that somebody that I feel like understands me or has things in common with me, I can talk to that person very easily. So I had that there at the church that Devin and I were going to. Flashback a few years up until this point, I had been like watching stuff that you're not supposed to be watching and doing things you're not supposed to be doing somewhat. So that was like my struggle, right? I got involved with the church with Devin, and the youth group was doing a mission trip to Haiti, and Devin was like, I feel called to go. I want to go. And at the time, I wasn't really, we had been going to, I had been going to church there for a while, but I still really wasn't like getting it. I really wasn't living it out. Like I was just going to church. I liked it. I enjoyed it, but still it was just like going to church, and that was like a check off box kind of. Devin wanted to go on the mission trip, so I'm like, okay, I'll go. That was literally it. It was like Devin was going, so I'm going kind of thing. So we went. I wouldn't necessarily say like life changing, but I think it opened my eyes and it opened my mind and it opened my heart in a way that I don't know how many other things I could have done that really. I think that's kind of what started it. What started my actual transformation into wanting to do better and be better and actually follow Christ versus just saying I'm a believer kind of thing. Yeah, so we ended up going on a similar mission trip to the same place like 2 more times. That was over the course of like from the first one to the third one, if I remember correctly, like a year and a half. And all of those were great. And by the time the last one came, it wasn't the mission trips that were doing it. Like I said, the first one like opened me up, ready for, Jesus to come in kind of thing. There was never really like a moment in particular, I don't think. But I remember there was a time where David and I we just decided like together, this is like, okay, we need to start actually living for Jesus. Like we've been going to church for all this time. We were probably, I think we were 17 at this point. So I'd been going to church for like a year with Devin. So we were like 17, and Devin was always better about the walk than me too. We decided together we were going to do it together. That was a step that we needed to take. From then on, my mind was consciously thinking about, like as cliche as it sounds, like what would Jesus do or say? And that's obviously doesn't mean that I was perfect or am perfect or ever will be perfect. If I did something that I knew I shouldn't do as a Christian that's walking out my faith, then the Holy Spirit would convict me of it. And so I knew from then on it was like I'm making progress in a way. And now I know that it's always making progress. You never get to a point to where you're like, okay, I'm good. It's always a continual growth, and it's always a continuous walk that there is no finish line to, I guess, until you die and go to heaven. I still wasn't like reading my Bible every day. I've really just started doing that within like the last year or so. Like I would go on a stint where I would read it like good for like a week or whatever, and then I wouldn't read it for 6 months kind of thing. Hello, honey.
Hello.
Okay, so back to the story. I remember that there was a time, like, at this point, we wanted to be together, but there was a specific day, I know exactly where we were, and we were eating in a restaurant. Just randomly started talking with each other about how we wanted to be together. So we were going to make a sacrifice, because at the time, both of us were still planning on going to college and doing whatever we wanted to do. And we were wanting to go to 2 different places, and it just kind of hit us both at the same time, where we're like, that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to stay here and go to college here where we live and be together. Like we just knew it then. It was the craziest thing. So that to me was like another, because I was feeling that way, and I was like kind of nervous to tell her that, but she was like, yeah, like I've been feeling that too, kind of thing. And so I was like, oh dang, this is crazy. So that is another thing that like made me know, like, okay, this is obviously from the Lord. That was still in high school. We were probably 18. That was probably junior or senior year. And for those of you that don't know, I went to public school until high school, and then I went to private Christian school like for high school. So I had some cool people there that I looked up to a lot. Not as many as you would think, but one person in particular. And he actually married me and Devin. He was one of my teachers at school. And so we got engaged right after high school. We graduated in May and we got engaged like in August, but we didn't get married for a year and a half after that. All during this time, we were still doing the thing, dude. We were still going to church. We were still, we were in some small groups, so that helped a little bit, but I was still never really in it. Like if I refer back to previously in the story when I say like the mission trips like opened me up, I feel like that was like all it was. It was just the door was cracked, but I didn't let it open all the way. You know what I mean? I feel like I had the Holy Spirit and all the things, and it was still like checking off a box. Like everything was checking off a box, like going to church, If I did read my Bible, it was checking off a box. Going to small group for me was checking off a box. I didn't really look forward to any of those things. Honestly, over the last like year or two, mostly the last year, has been when, I'm sure y'all know if you watched Devin's video, in the last year, like Devin hit her like lowest spot. In a way, I think that kind of helps me, because in the past when she's gotten like that, when she's gotten anxious or whatever, like me being, number one, a guy, number two, her husband, and we've been together all these years, I'm like, oh, well, what can I do for you? Surely there's something I can do to make you feel better. That just wasn't the case this time. I think that was when I realized it's like, okay, it's not me. Like she needs Jesus right now. And to see her make that connection go all the way to the lowest of lows, literally, because I know where she was, and she was always better than I was in her relationship with Jesus. But to see her get down to the lowest of lows and like know that I couldn't help her, there was nothing I could do for her except pray for her, and to see her like turn around and how much different she is now, that I know that she does actually now like rely on Jesus and what he can do for her and what he has done for her. Like literally, this is the first time I'm thinking about this, y'all. I wasn't even planning on saying anything about this. But I think that is what really opened my eyes and say, okay, if he can do that for her, what am I missing out on? And this was last year, guys. So I was working at the fire department. Luckily, I had somebody there, a few people, but mostly one person in particular that I could look up to and talk about things in a certain way. We had a similar, we were able to share like a couple stories, and he knew a little bit about what was going on with Devin, that she was struggling at least. He helped me help her get through that in a way. And so that was when I was like really just like, I don't know, it was almost just like a light switch just flipped in my head. And from then on, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna really rely on Jesus. Devin always wanted to tithe before, and I was like, honestly always try to get out of it, because I'm like, no, we need that money, we need that 10%. But we started tithing, and it's crazy what's happened to us since then. And just praying more, reading my Bible more, like looking forward to it. I don't always just, I'm like dying to read it, so don't take that the wrong way, but I'm not a reader either. Most of the time I look forward to it, and it's my time now. I use that as my alone time, and it's enjoyable, which is crazy. I never thought I would say that, but yeah. And it's just crazy to think of where we were and what we've been through in the last year, not only with social media, because most of you probably know that's like when we really took off on social media, but just like behind the scenes in our life and like everything we went through. Like Ivy's about to be 2, so the hard state, really hard stage of Ivy's life. And I think she had a lot to do with it all too. That definitely took a unexpected turn, because I never really thought about it in the way what Devin went through helped me. Watching somebody that you're that close to go through something that you can't do anything about, and you see what helps her. And I'm like, oh, so yeah, I think that's my main testimony, and I've never thought of it until now. So there you go. Sorry if that was kind of rambly. I'm not a good storyteller. And if you ask Devin if I'm a good storyteller, she will 100% tell you no. So it's a well-known fact. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening. Subscribe if you haven't already. We've got some fun stuff planned and some really cool stuff coming up, and we can't wait to share it with you guys. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting us and for subscribing or not or whatever. Even if you're just watching this random video, we appreciate it and we love you all. So we'll see you in the next one.